first question, what are your thoughts on the myths you commonly hear about college and or college applications? So one example of this might be perfect grades and perfect test scores are necessary to get into good colleges.
I think that's far from the truth. I think that amongst top universities, what they're really looking for is a demonstration of individuality or some sort of individual trait that makes you stand out, and that actually becomes harder if you have more people with strong individual traits and things that make them stand out. So then it becomes not necessarily a big fish in a small pond, it's a lot of big fish in an equally small pond.
How would a student make themselves stand out?
I'd say that the way, to use the average Lindbergh student as an example, everybody's trying to get into the same places using the same core characteristics, where they're all like, okay, well, I need to have this many clubs and this many extracurricular activities and all this other stuff to make themselves stand out, but if they stand up and look around, they all look exactly the same on paper. Therefore, then nothing that they're doing makes them stand out. It's not necessarily doing more, it's finding something that somebody's doing wrong or somebody's not doing right and then doing it better in a way that is beneficial to people, to things beyond just yourself.
So what examples of activities might fit that criteria?
I'm drawn immediately to the story of like a kid who right at the beginning of the pandemic designed a 3D printable thing to open doors without touching them. That would be an example. And then he was selling them and donating all the proceeds to charity.
That is interesting.
Yeah, it was just this little looked about the size of a credit card, and it had a little hook apparatus to it, and you could open doors with it. You could open any door with it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so myth number 2, you need to take a lot of AP and honors classes to get into good colleges.
So that is a self-fulfilling lie. And you can confirm this with the guidance staff, is that college applications, when they determine the rigor of your school, they have to do that in comparison to other schools. So let's say we have some school in Groveland, California. Do you know where Groveland is?
No.
Groveland is about an hour outside of Yosemite. Okay, it's a small mountain town. Okay, so if I have you from Lindbergh High School and a student from Groveland, and they're both applying to UCLA, those are two very different environments. How do I evaluate you two at the same level? I have to establish what a rigorous workload is at Groveland, and I have to establish what a rigorous course load is at Lindbergh. So if Groveland only offers 4 AP classes, and you take one, you're taking 25% of the AP classes offered. I might determine that that is rigorous. Okay? If you are at Lindbergh and we offer 16 AP classes, and you take one, that is not rigorous. Therefore, the constant push for more APs and you need to take more APs actually hurts you, because then you need to take more of them to establish that you're actually a rigorous student. So actually, you'd be better off with less APs.
So how would a student exemplify themselves as rigorous to colleges then?
Well, they see that's relative. When they evaluate your application, they evaluate the letters and the supplemental material is great. They evaluate it as you in relation to also what they know about the school in the area. So again, depending on the pond you're in is how they're going to look at you compared to the other ponds.
Okay. All right, so myth number 3, students need to be involved in as many extracurriculars as possible to get into good colleges.
I would say no. It's better to do one thing and be really, really good at it than to do 5 things and be mid.
Why is that?
Because that just shows you can juggle 5 things as opposed to being an expert at one thing.
So colleges lean more towards choosing the applicant that's really strong in one area?
Well, the applicant who plays 5 sports is not going to get in, but the applicant who plays 1 sport really well is.
Okay. Myth number 4, you have to go to one of the best colleges in the country to be considered successful.
By whom?
By society.
I would say that's probably not true. So, if you think about the best schools in the country, generally speaking, they achieve those rankings based on the publications made by their professors, but also their graduate programs. And truth be told, an undergraduate history degree at Harvard is no different than an undergraduate history degree at San Jose State. Really, it's the access that you have to those professors and potentially the letters of rec and the opportunities you can get from there. At the same time, though, if you look at like a who's who list of like CEOs in the Bay Area, most of them went to state schools. So at the end of the day, the local education system is just as good if you know how to do it and you know how to pursue your passions.
And last myth, number 5, you should apply to as many colleges as possible to ensure you can get into some good colleges.
That's what I call the shotgun approach. And I see these green sheets come at me with like 35 schools on there. I sit down and wonder, what is your parent thinking spending like $3,500 in college applications? Because that's just a waste of money. I think in a lot of cases, kids are applying to schools that either their counselors will tell them you're probably not going to get into, or they know they're not going to get into. So it's a waste of money. Focus on the things you are going to get into. Figure out what you're trying to do, or at least a good idea of what you're trying to do.
So how would you advise students to shorten their colleges and really focus on the applications they should be?
I think what comes to mind immediately is a student who wanted to be an aeronautical engineer. Okay, they're not applying to Yale, they're not applying to Princeton, they're applying to San Jose State, they're applying to like University of Washington, Seattle. They're applying to schools in these areas where a lot of like aircraft manufacturers, they're applying to schools in Florida. Like they knew these are the schools with the programs I want. Not just I'm going to go get an engineering degree at Yale and then I'm going to go apply there. Like no, you're targeting what you want based on what you think you want to do.
So you would advise more students to be like this student?
Yeah, otherwise you're just wasting money and time. I applied to like 5 or 6 colleges. I mean, you got a UC General App, maybe I threw San Jose State in there, maybe Santa Clara, and then a few others.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. All right, so do you believe that there is a college stigma at Lynbrook?
Define college stigma.
As in, people put a lot of pressure on students to submit a lot of applications, go to a really good college.
I mean, if students are putting pressure on each other about submitting numbers of applications, that's not very smart, because that's the same logic as Lynbrook students bragging about how late they stay up. Like, cool, you're bragging about masochism. Like, wonderful. So I don't necessarily know why the shotgun approach, let's apply to a lot of schools. I don't know exactly where that comes from. There is perhaps a stigma on where people end up going. Again, at the end of the day, it's not where you go, it's who you are and what you do. Because you all don't have to go to college. You could go become a plumber and make $300,000 a year. So, to give you more examples of that, like one of my best friends from Monte Vista, he went to Johns Hopkins right after high school. He got a degree in physics. Didn't really know what to do with it. Worked in private sector for a while. Eventually, landed an internship at the White House, which then he went back to grad school, and he was working for the Department of Energy for a while. Didn't like it. Went back to private sector. And then one day out of the blue, he's just like, well, I'm joining the Army. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, what you going to do in the Army? He's like, well, I'm going to do cyber warfare. I'm like, okay, cool. So he goes and he lives in like middle of nowhere, Georgia, doing cyber warfare for 4 years, and then making low-ranking officers pay. And then he's done with that, and immediately as he's demobilized, he gets a job making $200K in cybersecurity in the Bay. So he could have skipped all of that. He actually did not even need a college degree to have done that. You could go in and enlist in the Army and do cyber warfare. They'll pay you to train for a year, and you'll have 5 years of experience by the time everybody is done with college. And you can go be making $200,000 a year doing cyber warfare, doing cybersecurity, without going to college.
That's super interesting. So, in terms of the parental role in the college application process, do you believe that there is a lot of parental pressure on students for college applications?
Yes. So, you've got competing modes. The pressure, I'd say, is coming probably more from each other, from you all towards each other, as opposed to your parents necessarily. That was probably just as true when I was in Monte Vista as it is here now. What I don't understand is these stories I hear about parents shucking out thousands of dollars for college advisors, which more often than not is just some other parent whose kid got into a top 10 university. Okay, that doesn't make them experts. Truth of the matter is that our college advisors, our guidance counselors, know far more about the college application process than any parents.
So, how would you advise, if you could, parents to handle the college application process?
children and your child. Be aware of what they are good at and perhaps where they could improve. This is not innate to many parents. Many parents see their children as extensions of themselves as opposed to independent people. Parents also need to acknowledge that their child's life is their child's life, not their life. And at the end of the day, they're going to make decisions, and they'll be an adult, and you either recognize it or you don't. But I know way too many people following the path of the average Lindbergh student who I ran into in various capacities, either high school reunions and other things, where they're like, yeah, I sit in a cubicle all day and I hate my life. And I'm like, oh yeah, I love my job, it's fantastic.
So, what are some common mistakes that students often make in the college admissions process? Besides, what we've already talked about, or submitting too many apps.
Common mistakes. On the one hand, perhaps setting unrealistic expectations for themselves, but also on the other hand, I don't even know how waitlisting. I think early decision is just dumb. Nobody did early decision back in the day. Even then, it's just getting worse and worse and worse. I think there's a common misconception that everyone thinks that early decision has a higher admissions rate. No, just the kids who are able to put all their ducks in a row and actually apply early tend to be more put together and tend to be more qualified. So therefore, they're admitted at a higher rate. So it's a kind of false prophecy. Y'all don't need to do early admissions. The regular admissions process is fine.
So, question number 5. What are the most important factors in deciding which college is right for them?
I'd say location, school culture, climate's a big one, especially for kids coming from California. If you've never experienced a real winter, you should probably be aware of what a real winter looks like. Culture is important too. When kids apply to University of Chicago, I always tell them the subtle nickname of University of Chicago, which is where fun goes to die. So it has a reputation of being very kind of uptight. So being aware of those things, and again realizing that it's 4 years of your life that you will never get back. So what are you going to do with it, and how are you going to act when you are in that process?
So we've talked a lot about these common mistakes, but let's transition to a more positive side. So what are some things that students can actually do to improve their chances of getting into good schools?
Once again, how are you defining good?
As in top 20.
Perhaps it's not what they should do. Perhaps it's what they shouldn't do, which is try to do the same things that everybody else.
So, last question. If there's one piece of advice you could give to all graduating students about their futures, what would it be?
Take a gap year. Figure yourself out.
Really? Why is that?
Because everyone's been building towards this thing, which is like some sort of a city on the hill, or a better metaphor. You're all like the proverbial dog. The dog that's chasing the mail cart. And then you catch the mail truck. Then what? You don't know what to do with it. Perhaps stop chasing the mail truck. It's going to come around again. It comes by every day. You can always chase it.
So, why would you recommend a gap year out of all post-high school options?
Because the majority of people are going to go straight from college into a job, and then they're going to blink and they're going to be like 40. And what will you have accomplished?
So, how might students achieve self-discovery in this gap year?
Travel. Volunteering.
Just a lot of...
Something different.
Okay.
Move to Botswana and vaccinate children.
Yeah, that should be all the questions I have for today. So, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.